The Best of Our Knowledge explores topics on learning, education, and research. On today's program, PBS and NOVA this month have released 2 new films as part of an initiative to more effectively communicate climate change. Preparations are underway for the April 2024 total solar eclipse at one university, and spring is here, and in colder climates, so are amphibians and reptiles. It's all next on The Best of Our Knowledge. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm your host, Lucas Willard. April is recognized as Earth Month, and a new national campaign by PBS is putting a spotlight on how climate change is affecting communities across the U.S. PBS's long-running science series, NOVA, this month, released 2 films as part of its Climate Across America initiative, which is part of a larger, multi-year, multi-platform slate of programming addressing our changing world. The film Weathering the Future examines dramatic changes in weather. The film Chasing Carbon Zero explores technologies that could help the U.S. meet its ambitious climate goals. What makes both films similar is their approach. Instead of the doom and gloom or political messaging that sometimes comes up in conversations about climate change, the programs are focused on solutions. In addition to releasing the documentaries, NOVA is also fostering communication around climate change and enlisting the help of high school students to tell their own stories of living in an era of global warming. To learn more, I spoke with NOVA senior producer Caitlin Sachs about the decades of science that has become a politically sensitive topic.
I'd say it's always been NOVA's goal to talk about climate in as apolitical way as absolutely possible. We are not a public affairs program, we're a science program, and so we are just looking at the science and the evidence, and we really make great efforts to convey to our audience that we are not actually taking a position on any of this. We're just exploring various different aspects of this phenomenon. So what does that look like? For example, about 5 years ago, we aired a film called Decoding the Weather Machine, which just looked at how our planetary climate system worked and what the evidence was to show how it's changing and on what time scale. But it wasn't, trying to be finger wagging in a way, if that makes sense. It's more about allowing the audience to come to understand a natural system. Another way that manifests is, for example, with these 2 documentaries. Weathering the Future hardly mentions climate change because it's all about the impacts that we're feeling today. It's almost irrelevant why we're feeling the impacts. It is relevant because we know these impacts are going to get more severe. But the point is, we're already feeling some changes in our weather, which is how climate change is in many ways manifesting itself. And so what can we do about the problems we're facing today? And with Chasing Carbon Zero, the problem is not what the film focuses on. What the film focuses on is what we can do about it and the win-win-win scenarios that you can get, that society may benefit out of some of these solutions. So ways that so for example, a great example is induction stoves, which has been making a lot of headlines recently. Gas stoves put a lot of pollutants into your local atmosphere. I mean, I'm in the city. I have a carbon reader right in front of me. It's at 663 ppm in my apartment right now because I have a small apartment, and we turned on the stove to make eggs this morning. But there's also other chemicals that affect that can affect your respiratory systems, your heart, asthma rates. That's not why my throat today sounds like a frog. That's just a cold. But in addition to getting the carbon emissions out of our stoves, we're actually cleaning our air to make our bodies healthier. That's a win-win.
So what are some of the best practices? You just gave an example of your own kitchen and your own stove that you used to make your eggs this morning. But in these documentaries, what's an example of some of the best practices that were identified to effectively communicate that message and help people relate?
Well, I guess there's a few of them. So in Weathering the Future, we really tried to meet people where they were. And it's actually a pretty unusual NOVA in that instead of being packed with all of these scientific experts, a lot of the experts are everyday citizens, members of their community finding ways to address the impacts. And they are coming up with solutions. For example, in the Midwest, there's a growing number of farmers who are using a practice called no-till agriculture. And that is basically putting the steel plow, leaving it in the barn, and not turning over your soil after a growing season. And what that does is it allows the soil to build up structure, which can make it better withstand heavy rains, so the soil doesn't wash away. So by telling sort of a local story and showing the audience real people really confronting the real challenges, even if no-till agriculture doesn't apply to you in whatever it is, to me in Boston, Massachusetts, the kind of ingenuity that is being demonstrated does. Another example of how we're doing this is, for example, in Chasing Carbon Zero, which airs next week, there's a scene about geothermal energy, getting energy from the ground. And as it turns out, some of the same technology used to develop fracking for oil could be used to develop geothermal energy in geographic areas that would otherwise not be able to produce geothermal energy, by using that fracking technology. So there's a huge opportunity for individuals who were in one industry to transition to this other industry, still energy, but carbon-free energy. So there's like another win-win.
Let's talk about the community storytelling parts of this. How does PBS and NOVA encourage people to share their own stories about climate? And for somebody who maybe hasn't even thought about it before, how would you begin that conversation with your friends or neighbors?
Yeah, I think climate change can be really overwhelming to a lot of people to think about, because it feels like the future is so dire. And if that's the mindset, it makes it really hard to think about anything else like what we can do about it. And so what I would encourage is for individuals to first look at their piece of the world, whatever that is. That could be their geographic, their land, their home, their town. That could be their work or their industry or their family. And see how climate change is impacting that. And then see what it is that they can do about it. What are the potential solutions that can help make a difference in that piece of the world? Because that's what we need. We need, I think in order to address climate change, millions of people all working in the way that they can to help make the problem, to help diminish the problem, is what the solution is. There is no one solution. There's not even 100 solutions. It's a million solutions, and it comes from everybody in all sorts of different ways. And so looking at the ways that you can do what you can.
And high school students will be a part of this initiative as well. Could you tell me a little bit more about how high school students across the country are going to be involved in these conversations too?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years ago, NOVA piloted a program that we call NOVA Science Studio. And that is a program designed for middle and high school students to learn the fundamentals of science journalism, and specifically, or a little bit more specifically, science video storytelling. Little baby NOVA films. So it's now in its third year. Its second year was an all remote pandemic version, and now it's in its third year. And this third year, we have created and adapted the curriculum to have a climate storytelling focus. And that's in part because of this larger initiative, but also because in the first 2 years, we found students again and again and again wanting to tell those stories, tell those climate stories. And so also responding to that strong desire from youth to actually figure out how to talk about this. So this year, the way it works is we have about 70 high school students in the program in 5 different classes, and we're working with some of our partner stations to administer the curriculum in the course. And they are, broken up into groups and are creating their own short form videos that look at a climate impact to their region and a solution. And I have to say, I've been really impressed by what they're producing. They are impacts and solutions that I was not aware of, and I've been covering climate for almost a decade now, and it just reiterates the importance of local storytelling and empowering our youth to tell their stories and their perspective. Yeah.
I think young people just love making video projects anyway. When I was in high school, any chance that I got in an English or a science class or anything where you need to communicate something, I would try and make a video project out of it.
It's fun. And it really gets, students to engage with their world, to get out there, to meet scientists. We've been pushing and encouraging them to really find experts in their region, and they're doing it. It's like so impressive and exciting.
And young people are also, well, speaking from my perspective, a little more adept at social media, perhaps, than I am. Is there a social component, and are these videos being shared online, too?
So the distribution of the videos is sort of varied, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Primarily, it will be through the local station collaborations that we're doing. So in this year's iteration, that's WKAR and WHRO will be publishing the videos or potentially publishing the videos on their platforms in some way. They may also be published on the NOVA Science Studio platforms. There are a lot of considerations that go into that kind of the boring side of video publishing that we don't necessarily feel that we need to expose students to at this side, like, rights clearances and permissions and all sorts of things. So that is going to affect where exactly they get published, and it's going to be different for different students and different videos.
Caitlin, do you think that young people have sort of an advantage in communicating not only to their peers but older folks as well? Do you think it has more of an impact when a topic of something like climate change is communicated by a younger person?
I think it has the potential to be. I think we're seeing a lot of passion from young people in communicating about this problem, because they realize that this is a problem that has to be solved not only in their lifetime, but in our lifetime, for them to have a good life and for their children to have a good life. I just had my first son a year and a half ago, and at first I was thinking, like, he's going to be the one that has to fix this, and then I realized pretty quickly, no, it's not him. He's the one that's going to live with whether or not we fix it, and with if the generations sort of just a bit above and just a bit below me are going to fix it. But like, we are already in the it's time to fix it generation. And I think some young people can speak with a lot of passion. Now at NOVA, one of the things that we're actually trying to teach is how to tell stories that are not advocacy stories. NOVA I mean, we're not an advocacy organization. We don't make advocacy films. We, as I said earlier, we're just sharing the evidence and letting the audience, letting the people sort of make of that what they will. And so one of the things that we're trying to help impart to students is there is absolutely a place for advocacy, but there's also power in communicating without an agenda, but just sharing whatever the information and the facts are. And that's how you keep it apolitical. That's how you actually reach more people, by not going in with any sort of agenda, but actually taking a look at the issue you're trying to take a look at it, investigating all sides of it, and then reporting on it.
Caitlin Sachs is a senior producer at PBS's NOVA. The new films Chasing Carbon Zero and Weathering the Future are now streaming. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. This is The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. What's on your calendar a year from now? In April 2024, a total solar eclipse will track across the U.S. from Texas to Maine. Northern New York and New England are in the path of the totality that will last more than 4 minutes. With an expected bump in visitors to the region, hoping to catch a glimpse, educators and administrators at SUNY Plattsburgh have already begun preparing for the astronomical event. The April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse could be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for many, and English professor and SUNY Plattsburgh Dean of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Jeannie Babb, is asking the public to do more than save the date.
One of our taglines is Save the Year. So we want to create a number of events, invite speakers on campus to sort of lead up to the eclipse itself.
SUNY Plattsburgh will be in the right place at the right time next year. The university has formed a committee to start planning for the big day. Lisa Beth Kistner, a physics lecturer and director of the North Country Planetarium, said a solar eclipse happens when the moon moves in front of the sun, creating a shadow on the Earth's surface.
And then as we rotate, the moon's shadow will appear to track across the surface of the Earth. Any person within that track will see the sun's light become eclipsed or come to what we call totality, blocked out.
The last time a total eclipse was viewable in the United States was 2017. Kistner traveled to Idaho to see it, which she said generated a lot of enthusiasm for the next one.
The geometry of this eclipse is going to allow for a longer span of totality. And the estimate is that probably there will be more viewing of this because of the previous 2017 got so much hype.
Dr. Babb says the school has started arranging guest lectures and events, including reaching out to NASA astronauts.
We've targeted several people. We recommended several people that majored in disciplines that we have on this campus. And so we're hoping to get one or two of those astronauts to come and visit.
Instructors are also being asked to develop curricula around the eclipse. Plattsburgh English professor and director of the Center for Interdisciplinary and Area Studies, Michael Devine, said the eclipse celebration will focus on a theme of alignment.
We're going to align efforts. We're going to get the city of Plattsburgh, the town of Plattsburgh, the Chamber of Commerce, the library, arts organizations, to try to align efforts where we are doing something that is using the scientific phenomenon as a basis really to meditate on even deeper issues, our place in the universe, our relationship to each other.
As studies are being developed, Devine said the 2024 eclipse brings a sense of deep meaning.
Like, what does it mean to pass from darkness into light? What does it mean to all share a common vision? So I think it's a really unique opportunity for students, professors, classes, community members to all kind of participate in that and say like, hey, this is like a great unifying opportunity and it doesn't come around very often. So let's not waste it.
Devine also envisions the programming will have an impact on the college learning experience.
One of the things that I think that we now know about college is that we don't want to just be spoken to by experts, explain away the eclipse. Like, you know it and I don't, right? Like, so I think a lot of what the future of the humanities and the future of college entails is this kind of participatory, democratic voice. And hopefully the programming over the next year can really have that unifying feel.
NASA recommends safe solar viewers and warns against looking directly at the sun. Solar eclipses occur about every 18 months, but they're not always visible to everyone on a planet that's mostly covered in ocean. If you miss the 2024 eclipse in the U.S., you may not get another chance until 2044. You're listening to the best of our knowledge. Spring in the Northeast marks the return of much of the region's wildlife, including amphibians. Although salamanders, frogs, and toads are small creatures, human encroachment on their habitats is creating a big problem. WSHU's Sabrina Garone reports.
When you think about the arrival of spring, there are probably a few things you look forward to. Birds chirping, flowers blooming, maybe bears coming out of hibernation. For Tim Abbott, a conservation director with the Housatonic River Valley Association, it's the mass migration of amphibians.
The first warm spring rains in usually the middle of March are the signal for a range of amphibians to emerge from hibernation. And if they move in sufficient numbers, if the conditions are right, we call it a big night.
In northwestern Connecticut, the first so-called big night this year for salamanders, frogs, and toads happened on March 23rd.
And I have never seen so many salamanders in one spot, and I've been looking for 20 years.
In early spring, these tiny travelers will leave their underground homes to find vernal pools. Those are small, shallow bodies of water filled by rain or melting snow, and without water flowing in and out, they make a great place for these animals to breed. But Abbott says connectivity has become a big issue.
In between where they spend the winter and most of their life cycle under the leaves upslope in the forest, and where they would like to breed, are roads. And they have to cross them. So the sad part of this story is you see a lot of carnage because cars hit them. And I got out early enough so that I was moving the first of them, but after an hour, there were more than I could carry.
That's why Abbott believes it's important to bring more awareness to amphibians.
You can't just save one place and say that that species is fine because they use a mosaic of habitats. That little vernal pool at the bottom of the hill is very important for one part of the breeding cycle, but the forested upland on the other side of the road is where they're spending most of their time, and what's in between is the gauntlet that they run.
One amphibian that's particularly at risk is the eastern tiger salamander, getting up to 13 inches in length with dark yellow spots. It's an endangered species in New York State. According to the State Department of Environmental Conservation, they're confined to Long Island, with only about 90 breeding ponds being identified in recent surveys. Frank Quevedo, executive director of the South Fork Natural History Museum, says that's because of overdevelopment in their habitat.
The Long Pond Greenbelt and the east end of Long Island, a lot of people think there's a lot of rural habitat, but it's being overdeveloped slowly.
The museum was recently awarded a $30,000 grant from the Holloman Price Foundation to track the salamander's movement through the preserve over the next 3 years, a first-of-its-kind study on Long Island's East End.
We need to get trained to implant in each tiger salamander a small transmitter. And then next year, when it's breeding season again in February and March, we'll go out and implant the transmitters into the adults. We're going to try to find out by tracking them through radio telemetry what areas around their breeding ponds that they utilize.
The preserve is made up of 1,900 acres of wetlands and coastal plain ponds, making it one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in New York State. Quevedo says the goal of the study is to inform state and federal officials about the potential environmental impacts of building development there.
There's still a lot of unanswered questions, such as, the transmission cables under the preserve.
Utility company PSCG Long Island has proposed laying an underground transmission line between substations in Brookhaven and East Hampton, part of which would run right through the Greenbelt.
What is the electromagnetic field and the vibrations going to do to other animals in the area, such as snakes and turtles and other salamanders, because they are sensitive to vibrations.
Quevedo believes the company is vastly underestimating the amount of area these salamanders utilize, and he hopes the study will prove it.
They had said to the public that they only use 500 feet around their breeding ponds, and I truly believe they utilize way more than that. I think they use more than 1,000 feet.
There's no word on where that proposal stands right now, but Quevedo says the potential for development in the area is super concerning.
They are a food source for other animals, such as herons and raccoons, but they also oxygenate the soil. By living underground and creating and living in these burrows, they oxygenate the soil, which we use for farming.
But in addition to informing developers, Quevedo hopes the study will educate the public about an animal they might not have realized was in their own backyard.
WSHU's Sabrina Garone reporting. You're listening to the best of our knowledge. Coming up on next week's episode of The Best of Our Knowledge, a group of university students presents their invention to aid people with physical disabilities in the workplace. Here's a hint of what to expect.
And after that, the cuts have been applied, the door will move out, and the user will pick up the paper ream and then just flick it a little bit to cut off any sides which are not cut.
Let's see what happens here.
And The Best of Our Knowledge welcomes your feedback. You can contact the show by emailing knowledge@wamc.org. This has been The Best of Our Knowledge, episode 1701. The Best of Our Knowledge is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Thanks to associate producer Jody Cowan. Our executive producer is Dr. Alan Chartok. The latest on all National Productions programs is available via the Airwaves newsletter and our flagship station's website, wamc.org. Until next time, I'm Lucas Willard.